Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I am coming back at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we're going to go ahead and continue on with our Battlegroup Boot Camp. The Battlegroup Boot Camp is a tutorial, a rules tutorial explaining the rules of Battlegroup, how to play in bite-sized chunks. We're taking each chapter of the book and breaking it down into its own special video. We've already done the introduction to Battlegroup, which basically just tells you what Battlegroup is, general concepts, overarching summary of the rules. And then we talked about the first chapter, which is the turn and orders, how you generate your orders and how you issue orders and what they mean. And then in the last video we did movement, like how to move your models and movement rates. Okay, now in this video, this is the first video where we're going to start talking about open fire. This is basically going to talk about the firing basics, fire arcs, etc. But we're also going to include small arms and HE suppressive fire. Okay, firing is broken down into a number of different chapters. One of them is small arms suppressive fire. Another one is small arms aimed fire. And then it kind of evolves into another chapter, which is high explosive aimed fire. And then it goes to armor piercing aimed fire. Armor piercing aimed fire is basically tank on tank, because you're not going to armor pierce an individual soldier. I mean, you could, but that wouldn't be effective use of your ammunition. All right, so let's talk about the chapter open fire. Okay, so there's many different types of weapons and many different types of targets. And this chapter deals with them all, from the infantryman armed with a rifle or submachine gun to large caliber howitzers, multiple rocket launchers, flamethrowers, anti-aircraft cannons, and everything else. Okay, firing is dealt in two different ways with different effects. The first is suppressive fire, which we'll talk about, and the second is aimed fire. Okay, so suppressive fire is less accurate and less likely to cause death. It is more likely to pin your target. Aimed fire is shooting at visible and identified enemies to destroy them. Do not fall into the trap of believing that aimed fire is somehow better than suppressing fire. Both have an important place, and pinning an enemy is a very useful tactic. Okay, as you might remember from previous videos, if you are pinned, you can no longer receive or act upon orders. So basically you're just locked down, can't do diddly poop, right? So if you're able to pin someone, you've effectively removed them from the game. And for your opponent to be able to remove the pin, it's not a simple like at the end of the turn the pin comes off, or you roll some dice and a pin comes off. No, this game doesn't do that. To remove a pin, at the minimum, you have to draw a battle counter chit, and when you do that, that impacts your overall army morale. So your morale goes down. And remember, when your army morale reaches 0, then you've lost the game. The game is over. Your side either retreats, surrenders, what have you. The enemy takes the field. So as a tactic, or as a result of your pinning them, effectively you've eliminated them, or at least added to their battle rating. Okay, I went off on a tangent explaining the effectiveness of suppressive fire. So let's continue on with this chapter. Firing basics. There are 2 rules that all units firing an enemy by whatever method must comply with. The first, line of sight. The second is range. Okay, so a target must be within the firing unit's line of sight and range before it can be engaged with any type of fire. Fire arc. All units have a firing arc, depending on what type of unit they are. So an infantry unit, which would be anything like this, normal men running around, they of course have a 360-degree arc of fire. They're nimble and fast enough to be able to bring their weapons to bear quickly in any direction. Deployed guns. Let's say you've got an anti-tank gun or a mortar. It has a 90-degree arc of fire to the front. 90-degree arc is what I like to call a 45-degree arc, because using this pipe cleaners, okay, I'm going to use these pipe cleaners as an example. Let's pretend this unit is a mortar. Straight ahead would be considered 0 degrees. Off to the right at a 45-degree angle, and then off to the left at a 45-degree angle, this whole angle here is 90 degrees. So that's the 90-degree arc that they're talking about. So it's basically, you have a 45-degree arc to either side for a total of 90 degrees. It's not hard to understand. Okay, vehicles like your Panther or your Sherman. Vehicles with fixed weapons, like a Stug, have a 45-degree arc to the front. Okay, so 45-degree arc, like I said, this is a 45-degree arc, but you would have to I need to make a template, because you would have to take that and turn it to the gun. So it's basically a very narrow arc. It's not as wide as an anti-tank gun or a mortar, because those are a lot more nimble and maneuverable, where a fixed gun on a vehicle is pretty much only able to shoot in this general direction. Turrets. If the vehicle's weapon is mounted on a turret, then it has a 360-degree arc of fire, like infantry. Pintle mounts. A vehicle with a pintle-mounted weapon, such as a machine gun, has a 360-degree arc of fire. If it is on top of a turret, then this is independent of the direction the turret is facing. Okay, so hypothetically, let's use this one as an example, because this one does have a pintle-mounted machine gun sitting on the top, right? Okay, so if this turret is firing there, that doesn't matter. This pintle-mounted machine gun could fire over there. Basic ranges. There's a ton of weapons, specifically in the campaign books, but the rules try to cover most of them, but there's still a few more that show up in the campaign books. But the basic weapons are the rifle, the submachine gun, light machine gun, medium machine gun, heavy machine gun. Then you've got autocannon, anti-tank gun, long anti-tank gun, a deployed cannon or howitzer, a tank gun, and a long tank gun. And hopefully I've got a little chart here that I can show on the screen that shows the different ranges. If not, we'll just say that a rifle can shoot 30 inches. A medium machine gun, a light machine gun, and a mortar can all shoot 30 inches. The submachine gun is 10 inches, and then some of the heavier weapons shoot a lot further. A long anti-tank gun and a long tank gun, which pretty much is the same guns, can shoot up to 70 inches. 70. Not 12 or 24 inches in some other games. Okay. Line of sight. For suppressing fire or aimed fire, a unit must have a line of sight. Difficult to give definitive rules for terrain and models being so varied, but the firing unit should be able to see at least 25% or more of the target unit. Be generous and expect the same back from your opponent. And if it's hard to tell, the simple solution is just to allow suppressing fire only, because enemy know or suspect an enemy is there, but just open fire regardless. Okay, this hedge obviously doesn't block line of sight, but if there was a hill or something over here, and or better yet, if the hill was over here, and if this was a single unit, you could still shoot at the unit because the majority of the unit would be spotted. Okay, so if the hill did cover these guys, this is more than 25%. This is exactly 40%. So you would be able to shoot that. But if, let's say, this part of the squad was not behind the hill, you could not shoot that unit because that's only 20%. They're saying roughly 25%. It's really up to the players to decide how you want to work that out. But the rule is 25%. Open fire. If a unit's order allows it to open fire, then the commanding player can choose which type of fire it wishes to use and what type of ammunition it will use, if it has a choice. Specifically tanks, like armor piercing and HE. It must nominate the enemy unit as his target, and he must state these before he begins to resolve firing or rolls any dice. Okay, this is important in the fact that these two are two different teams, right? These each get their own order die. And this unit would fire at these guys, but before he starts, this player has to just, and let's say he uses the open fire order, which means he's not moving at all. He's just going to shoot twice. So he can't shoot at one, roll the dice, and see how the results affect this unit, and then decide where his second shot is going. You have to nominate both targets before you roll any dice. Now, on the first shot, if you wipe these guys out, well, then your second shot would be wasted or ineffective, or they would be doubly dead. Okay, so there's a common game term throughout these rules. It's called pinned. Be it an infantry squad, a deployed gun, a tank, or anything else, is one that is under so much fire that it can do little except look at its own survival. The men or crew might be hiding in the ditch nearby, maneuvering to find better concealment, dealing with wounded, or just hugging the cover. And they can't do much else. A unit can only have one pin marker at a time, not like bolt action where you build up your pins, and a second pin has no further effect, because once they're pinned, they're pinned. A pinned unit cannot be given any orders, and will thus do nothing until its pin marker is removed. Those are the basics, and you know that. That's pretty much an understood rule. Now let's talk about, and this is the topic of this video, suppressing or area fire using small arms, machine guns, and explosive shells. Suppressing fire, also known as area fire, is used to harass the enemy, keep their heads down, and generally scare the wits out of them. Its intention is not to kill them, although casualties might be caused as a desirable side effect of hot lead flying about. Its primary role is to pin the enemy and generally make it difficult or impossible for them to move or fight back. Keep them under a hail of bullets, and the shell will go a long way to achieving victory, because most soldiers would rather take cover and stay there when the bullets are coming thick and fast rather than get up and fight back. Okay. Using suppressive fire. When a unit opens fire, it can choose to be suppressing fire, spraying the area with bullets and shells, and follow these steps. Roll for suppressing fire effect, and then roll the unit's cover save. Okay, so I roll to see if I affect them, and then they roll to see if they save based on whatever cover they're in. There is a table called a suppressing fire table. I'll put it up on the screen so you can see this. This is a quick reference sheet that I would use at any game. And I would make sure that all my players have a copy so they basically can know what's going on. Cross-reference the firing unit's rate of fire, which is up and down along the left side of the table, or the type and size of the shell being used. That's on the bottom left of the thing. HE fired from what size gun? Or armor piercing. I guess you could suppress with armor piercing. Cross-reference it with the unit type and the range. So right next to the rate of fire you see range, short, medium, and long. And those will correspond with the target type. So and I'm using these as an example. So this would be infantry firing at infantry. So you look at that first number, 2, 3, or 4, or the 3, 4, 5, or the 4, 5, 6, depending on your rate of fire. This will give a die roll required to pin the target unit. If that test is passed, the unit must make a cover save. If the test to shoot fails, then it was too wild and has no effect, marked. And a dash mark means that there is no chance of causing pinning against the target with that weapon. So you'll notice that a rate of fire of 1 to 4 at long range cannot, medium and long, cannot do suppressive fire against an open-topped armored fighting vehicle. But at short range, within 10, it could. Because maybe they have a hand grenade or something, and the crew gets scared. If you're an enclosed armored fighting vehicle, you need at least a 5 rate of fire and be within 10. That's a minimum. And aircraft, you can affect them with a 5 or more. Rate of fire, because it's considered long range all the time. But yeah, you can suppress an aircraft. And then there's the cover save. That's the hit. That's the 2-hit number, or the suppressing fire effect table. Then you have a cover save. Under fire, men seek cover. Their natural response is to find better cover, better chance of survival. Of course, this also applies to gun crews and vehicle crews. Dug-in cover is better protection than in the open, etc. This is represented with a cover save. And I got a little chart here that shows the cover saves. There's 3 different types of cover, or units that can utilize cover. Infantry, deployed guns, and vehicles, pretty much everything. Aircraft don't use cover. And then what kind of cover is it? It's either going to be open, soft, hard, reinforced, or hardened. Okay, that's kind of vague, so let me explain what that is. Open. As it says, the unit is not in cover on the table. Players should remember that even in the open, like these guys, they have no terrain around them. Infantry will find some form of cover. Bushes, long grass, dips in the ground, not represented by a flat wargaming table. Soldiers under fire can always lie low for cover, and we assume that they do. Even though the static model might be standing up, when you shoot at them, they dive for cover in a ditch in that area. It's assumed that the table is not perfectly flat. Okay, soft cover. A soft cover. The unit has some form of cover that makes it harder to see them, even if it wouldn't be very effective at stopping a bullet. This might include a hedge, because hedge provides concealment. You could hide behind it, but bullets could probably still fire completely through that, and it's not going to stop a bullet. That's considered soft cover. Also, things like woods, bushes, a thicket, a crop field, or wooden fences even. Okay, now hard cover. This is good cover that makes it hard to see them, of course, and would stop a bullet. This means it would be something like a stone wall. Dug-in vehicles also count as hard cover against suppressing fire. And buildings. Okay, so just imagine it being hard and would give you complete cover. So a stone building, a wooden building, sounds like hard cover. So think of soft cover, or even a stone wall is hard cover. Remember, soft cover is cover that a bullet can travel through. Now, hard cover is a building. Yes, bullets can go through buildings, but it would be much harder. That's why it's hard. Okay, reinforced cover. This is improved hard cover. It's designed to withstand fire, such as foxholes, trenches, fortified positions, and buildings that have been reinforced. You've seen those buildings that have had like sandbags piled up on the side of the walls. That would be considered reinforced. So think of it like hardcover that was built specifically as a fighting position. Also includes bunkers and strongholds. Even strongholds constructed of wood, it was built specifically to provide cover. It's not like just a farmland wall. Okay, and then the last one is hardened cover. This is the toughest cover, designed to withstand the heaviest fire, such as concrete bunkers and pillboxes. Okay, so depending on what is its construction, it would fall under one of those categories, and you would just have to make sure that your players at the table know which ones are which, so that they won't have any surprises. Pinning. Pinning, if the target unit fails to pass the cover save, then it's marked as pinned. So I like to use the same, I have two methods of marking pin. My most common use is a glass bead, and I like to use red. Red stands out pretty drastically on the table. So if this guy shoots over there and passes his effect roll, so he affects them, and they roll and fail their cover save, then I would just drop a little red dot on them and they are pinned. Now alternatively, I might use another pin marker that I have in my collection, which these are pretty nice, but I've got a tub of these. Okay, suppressing fire and casualties. Of course, with shells landing and bullets fizzing past, there is a chance that there will be casualties. Because you never know. You got, what they call it, lucky hit. If an infantry unit or a deployed gun rolls a natural 1, for its cover save, then as well as being pinned, the unit takes a casualty. And I use rings on my 15 millimeter models to give units casualties. In 20 millimeter, if I have my guys individually based, I would just pull one of the models off. And I don't see a reason why you couldn't play this as well in 28 millimeter. You could play it in any scale. If you have them individually based, you pull one model off. If you don't, just mark them with a casualty somehow. No morale test is required for that casualty. Vehicles are not affected like that. They just become pinned. So basically, your gun or infantry, because the men are exposed to the elements and bullets could whiz by and actually hit them by accident, they can take a casualty. But because your crew in a tank are going to be buttoned up when they're taking fire, specifically when you're suppressing them, they're going to close their hatches and you're not going to be able to cause that random hit. Before we close out the video, I want to give you an example of how suppressing fire could work. So let's assume this is an MG42 heavy machine gun with a rate of fire of 8. And I mark my units with a little green cube telling me that I've issued them an order. And then once all my orders are issued, then I pick these green cubes up. But I'm going to put a green cube down and I'm going to say, I'm going to open fire, which means he's not going to move. He's going to shoot twice. And I'm going to shoot this infantry in the open, which is 18 inches away. And I'm going to shoot this, we're going to call it an open-topped armored vehicle. Let's call it an M10. This guy's going to shoot the M10 with his second shot. And they're going to be suppressive fire. So he rolls a die for this one and rolls a die for that one. And I'm going to say the green is for the infantry and the gray is for the M10. I would roll the die. And let's just say that I roll a 5 and a 6. Now, if you look at the rate of fire table, I have a rate of fire of 8, so I fall into the 5 and 8 section. The infantry are 18 inches away, so I only needed a 4. But luckily, I got a 5. The second shot was 20 inches away, if you remember. So medium is 10 to 20, where long is actually over 20 to 30. So I know there's 20 in both, there's 10 in both, but just understand that if it's over that, then you go to the next category up. So it would still be considered medium range, and you look at the open-topped AFV, I needed a 6, and luckily the second roll was a 6. So I successfully pinned both of them, possibly. So at this point, the infantry needs to roll a cover save. Infantry in the open needs a 6. So I roll the die and I get a 1. Well, that means I failed. I receive a pin, but worse than that, because I rolled a 1, I receive a casualty. Now, what the example is saying is my M10 is actually obscured by a tree line. I know we don't see that on the table, so it's not an automatic. The cover save for vehicle in the open means none, because if you were able to succeed on your suppression, they don't get a saving throw. But because he's considered in soft terrain, remember trees are soft, you need a 6 or better, which is not very good. And I roll a die and I get a 4. So that means I failed. And it is now also pinned. So that was a very successful turn with my MG42. He fired there with a rate of fire of 8. He fires there with a rate of fire of 8. Pins him, causes a casualty, and successfully pins him, mainly because I suck at rolling cover saves. Alright, well thank you for coming out and watching this start of our open fire segment of the boot camp. This was suppressing or area fire with small arms, machine guns, and high explosive shells. And in the next video, we're going to go to aimed fire.